Welcome to our second season of NIFS's Open Doors Film Panel Series. I'm Professor Jeffrey Wisotsky, and we're coming to you live from the studios of Bronx Community College. As you know, this series is produced in collaboration with the Governor's Office of Motion Picture and Television Development, New York Production Alliance, and our Media and Digital Film Club members who are streaming this live from our Bronx Community College TV studio. Our program is made for you, the next generation of filmmakers and crews who will join the growing and thriving industry here in New York State. Today we want to explore a very backbone of the industry, union crews. Who are they? What they do? How to become a member? And how these jobs are not only stable and well-paying, but jobs that are creative as well. With us today, we have a lighting director and gaffer, Richard Cohn, a Local 52 member who brings 40 years of experience on such shows like the Netflix original series The Get Down and Jonathan Demme's Ricky and the Flash and The Devil Wears Prada. Joining us also is Chad Birmingham, a cultural anthropologist turned music editor on such films as DreamWorks' Thank You for Your Service, Lassie Hallstrom's A Dog's Purpose, and Malcolm D. Lee's Barbershop, The Next Cut. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. So our film students in the audience and our students watching this program online want to know the story of how each of you got into the union. What was the entry point for you, and what were some of your first jobs? Chad?
Oh, well, thanks very much, Jeff. Cultural anthropology took me to postgraduate studies, and I came to New York, and I ended up working after graduation in several nonprofits while I was making music after hours, and I ended up actually going then to work for a commercial music company where I was helping set up rooms to record music for live sessions and doing some of the post-production work as well. With that material, putting together reels for the composers who worked there to send them out for prospective jobs, and editing music to picture for commercials and other longer form type projects. And it was when I was working there that a friend of a friend reached out that she knew of a feature film that needed an intern. So I went after my job to this sound house that did feature film sound editorial, and I ended up digitizing material that had been recorded in the field of horses making noise, and it was for a film that featured a lot of horses, and this was to prepare it for editors syncing it to the picture, and the film ended up being titled Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and the director of that was Ang Lee. And I asked how the people in that sound house worked, and they said they were all freelance, but they were members of the Motion Picture Editors Guild, and which provided them with a guaranteed wage as well as benefits of being in the union. And so it was, in that place that I saw people who had worked on some of the largest films being done in New York that day in very creative positions, but also having this kind of security of getting paid for their work.
Richard?
Well, I always was interested in behind the scenes, backstage things. So even since I was in high school, I was always involved with plays, stage lighting. As time went by, I went to school. Actually, by coincidence, we both have the same alma mater. We both went to the University of Wisconsin in Madison. But while I was out there, continued to do a lot of things with local music groups, the opera company, work in one of the theaters. Now it's the Oscar Mayer Civic Center, but back then it was the Capitol. It was an old tab house. That's getting to another history of entertainment in the United States, but I always was involved with it. I'm from Brooklyn originally. When I came back, I had worked for PBS in Wisconsin. I worked for a variety of things out there, did some TV things and movies and installations at some of the caves. So I've always had a great interest in lighting. And other people in my family were very interested in photography and lighting. So I was always very attuned to that. When I came back to New York, got more and more involved with lighting, working for one of the equipment companies. Initially, I was so afraid that I knew so much less than everybody in that specialized branch that I devoured every magazine or catalog, picked everybody's brains, and after a few months, I wound up like being hired away by their competitors because they realized like I was really hungry to learn. Then from there, I guess you're not supposed to say it these days, but it's the truth. I used to drink with some of the guys in the union, and we became friendly, and there was a period where things were a little more open, and that still happens today, where the enrollment period closes, it opens, closes, opens. But anyway, through those people, I got into the union initially. Still had worked with some of the equipment houses and done a lot of other things, but gradually I was fortunate to learn from some wonderful people who were in the business. That's pretty much how I learned. Even though I had a college degree in communication, I really learned once I got back into the real meat and potatoes of it over here in New York. And it was a little different then. Worked at some of the old studios and stages, the old Fox stage, which was the Sony studio over on the west side. That's gone now. You get a studio apartment there, but it's no more studio. Of course, Kaufman Astoria, which was the old Paramount stage, did a lot of stuff there over the years. So I kind of gradually got more and more involved with the union and doing more and more jobs. And as Chad said, it became apparent pretty early on that if you wanted to get good wages, if you want to have health insurance, if you want to work on the top of the line projects, you eventually need to get involved with the union.
And that brings us to the next union question for Chad. And Chad, this is a three-part question. What is Local 700? And also, where do you work? And do you go to an office every day?
Yeah, okay, sure, Jeff. Local 700 is the Motion Picture Editors Guild, and it covers a bunch of specialties, people who edit picture, people who edit sound, music editors, re-recordists, and some of the other functions related to that. At one point, it covered post-supervisors as well. And their office is in downtown Manhattan, and they have an excellent training room there for the members who can listen to all kinds of seminars and get their hands on some of the latest technology in terms of compositing visuals, Flame, Inferno, all of the Adobe suite, things like that. So it's really, it's a group that has a natural affinity in terms of how picture and sound work together, music and picture work together. I don't go to an office every day. I go to a cutting room because at one point film was actually physically cut, is what it's called.
They still call it a cutting room.
And they still call it a
Cool.
cutting room. These cutting rooms are in various locations around the city. Sometimes they are located by where a lab might be that's processing the footage from being shot on set, or in a part of the city that's got attractive commercial real estate rates, but might not be so convenient to get to. Other times I work from my house, which is really convenient to get to if you're already there. And so my setup, though, wherever I am, is comprised of pretty much a Pro Tools system running off of a Macintosh computer, and a monitor or two or three, and some speakers so that I can play things, because very often, as opposed to some of the sound specialties, I'm playing a lot of stuff for a director or for an editor to review. And the third part of your question, if you would remind me, Jeff.
Well, I think we've covered where do you work and do you go to an office? And I think this is a good lead-in for Richard, because Richard, we need to know three parts also. What is Local 52? And what is a motion picture studio mechanic, and what do they do?
Okay, so I am a member of IATSE, that's International Alliance of Theatrical and Stage Employees, IATSE Local 52, Motion Picture Studio Mechanics. Within our field, there's a lot of different locals that have jurisdiction over different crafts. Many of them are under the umbrella of the International Alliance, the IATSE. Local 600, the camera operators and the ACs. Is your local IATSE?
Yes, it is
Yeah,
as well. Yeah.
most of these entertainment organizations, Local 1, the Broadway house, that's also IATSE. In some cases, there may be other organizations. I used to be a member of NABIT Local 11 at NBC. CBS has some IBW people, but most of the entertainment stuff throughout the United States and in Canada is IATSE, International Alliance. So motion picture studio mechanics, our group is several specialty crafts. So I'm an electrician, Sparky. Grips, carpenters, who are sometimes called shop craftsmen. There's a lot of special nomenclature and lingo in this business stuff. But let me see if I can mention all the ones who are in Local 52. Electrics, grips, carpenters, sound, video, medics. And did I say props? No. And props. But it sometimes gets a little confusing because the prop department is both people who are handling props and people who are doing dressing. Should I take a moment to explain the difference between dressing and props?
Absolutely.
So, prop department oversees all that stuff. That's objects and actual materials. But if it just sits there, it's just set dressing because you see it in the picture, in the mise en scene. Is that the proper term?
Mise en scene,
Yeah, mise en scene.
Good.
So it's there. But as soon as the actor or the talent touches it, bottle of water to drink, telephone to dial, table lamp to turn on, it becomes a prop. And because it's used and there's continuity with the script supervisor, which is different local, that's why that's a separate group of people who handle the props as opposed to the dressing. The chairs are dressing unless I move the chair or throw the chair. Then it becomes a prop. So those are some of the people who are within motion picture local studio mechanics, Local 52. And what do we do? I mean, I guess I take it for granted because I've been doing it so long that the different crafts that I just described are self-evident, but electricians deal with electricity, providing for the lights, and we interface with the camera department and the director of photography. The grips work in concert with the photographic department and the electric department to shape and mold the light, also to place cameras and build platforms and mount cameras, camera movement. The set carpenters, they build stuff, they're construction. Sound people, fairly obvious, they record the sound. The video people, similar type of thing, although video playback, other specialty things can get involved with it.
And by the way, that's a great lead-in for the next question for Chad. You work as a music editor, and can you take us through the process of a music editor on a film?
Oh, okay, yes, sure. I think that dovetails in terms of what happens on set and what happens before the set is pre-production. And oftentimes a music editor might start a project as early as working to prepare for scenes that are being shot with musicians, or things that are being shot as playback, where the sound department or a music playback operator might be rolling a pre-recorded track, and then the actors on set would be miming to this with their instruments or vocals. So a music editor could get involved that early. It could be on set making notes about what the actors are actually doing, if there's live music being performed. I have a friend who worked on a film where the actors were constantly playing music, and so he was working in concert with the continuity department to write what keys were being played in and what modalities, and so how they could augment that live music that was happening in post-production. And then, of course, in post, the music editor is really working at full bore, trying to wrangle the music for the final version of the film, as well as beforehand the temporary needs of music in the film. So the producers might want to screen the film and see how the edit is coming. Are they close to locking the cut of the storytelling? And so this might be at a point before the composer has actually started writing original music. So the music editor's responsibility then is to find existing score that can be purposed as underscore in these scenes to give a sense of how the storytelling is going to function.
And Richard, in terms of jurisdiction, I've been a member of the Directors Guild of America for 25 years. And, you know, we have an assistant director first, a second, and a production manager. What crafts are within Local 52's jurisdiction? Could you talk
Well,
a
the
little bit
crafts
about
that I just mentioned.
Right, sound, carpenters.
Sound, carpenters, grips, electric. I also just wanted to mention something that Chad touched on, this idea of pre-production, production, post-production, and I even like to say distribution and promotion.
Mm-hmm.
These are all important phases in the selling and distribution of this product called a movie or a TV show. And pre-production, production, post, sometimes they're very independent, but many times they need to be dovetailed and coherently thought about as the thing goes along. Like Chad said, at the beginning of the process, before the composer's written anything, the director may already want to have a sense of the type of bed of sound that's going to be there for him.
Which is a great lead-in because we're going to be rolling in a piece that Chad worked on. But Chad, could you tell us a little bit about how you might work with a picture editor and where do your roles overlap and diverge?
Oh, yeah, sure. Like Richard was saying, what might happen is that the director has an idea for how they would like music to function in the scene. And so the picture editor might give me that scene as a quick time that I would import into Pro Tools. And then I would go through my library of existing score and try to find something that seems appropriate. And I might cut it to length. And oftentimes, film score is a little bit forgiving in terms of not being exactly on a definite meter that recurs throughout the entire piece, but might have some twists and turns in it that could be manipulated to underscore the shape of the story in that scene. So there, we won't see it today, but there was a scene of a breakup and they wanted the music to come in soft and then become sad and then pause and then crescendo at the end. So I might give them some options for that and they might choose one and say, we've now recut that scene. Could you also adjust the music to accommodate now the shorter beginning and the longer end? So my task is then how to retain the musicality while serving the picture. So that's really usually what it is that the music is cut to fit the picture. And so I will give music to the picture editor. They might recut the scene and then give it to me and say, you know, we just put a fade or we left a hole there where the scene got longer. Can you find a way to extend that, either through adding some sampled instruments or looping a section or working with the tempo to slow it down there, or you know, what types of tools are in my toolkit to address that. The only time where it becomes, or one of the main exceptions when it becomes a little more reflexive in terms of music leading picture, is when there is on-camera performance sequences and there is a more fixed relationship between what we see and what we hear. When the music is scored, the characters have no consciousness of that, of course, in the story. So we're a little bit more free to play with that relationship between synchronization. When do we hear the final note as opposed to when do we see the final shot? You know, sometimes those things happen exactly at the same time, or sometimes they're staggered a little, and that's where kind of the poetics of editing comes in. And those things are oftentimes preferences of the director as expressed through the editor, and my role in music, this is a subspecialty then to serve their vision.
And we're going to see a piece of your work shortly, but I just want to tell you that we adopted a rescue dog, a Shih Tzu poodle named Yossi, 5 years ago. And when I saw this film, A Dog's Purpose, it's the first clip we're about to see, directed by Lasse Hallstrom for Amblin Entertainment. I mean, I cried so much. You talk about having tissues. It was beyond tissues, but the music, the emotional impact and the souvenir I left with that film was very significant in me being a dog owner. But I want to set this up, Chad. In the clip we're about to see, we're at a point in the film where Ethan and his dog have just finished a slightly sad and disconcerting family lunch, and Ethan is feeling a little down. What can you tell us about how the music is supposed to function here before we roll in the clip?
Well, you know, I think that description of the scene prior is apt, And that's why I had trouble finding temp music for the scene, is because I thought that after this kind of family unpleasantness, Ethan would be feeling sad, but it was conveyed to me by the director and the editor that he was supposed to be feeling more neutral going into this. We'll hear the theme that Rachel Portman, the wonderful, wonderful composer of the original score for this film, has deployed very effectively throughout. And this is probably its most joyful, ecstatic iteration, where we see the boy and his dog engaging in a fun afternoon of play. And critically, the father we see in the frame toward the end of that sequence. So there's kind of a shared moment even as he stands apart. And we'll play it if we can, if we have time, through the segue. One of the functions of music was to continue to develop the dog as a character independent of his relationship with the boy. And we'll see, you can let me know if you think that it helps convey a sense of the dog's personality, the music.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you one thing, this morning my dog had a great personality. He picked up a bone this big and chased him through the park to get the bone out. Okay, so we're about ready to roll the clip, and let's roll A Dog's Purpose.
Ethan was sad. I didn't know why.
Hey, Bailey! Captain America, remember? He could take out that bomb in a second. Pow! Oh, you like it, don't you? Oh. Come on. Come on. Yeah, boy. Okay, Bailey. Get it, boy. Woo. Come on. Yeah, boy. Come on. Come on. Oh, where'd it go? Come on, boy. Oh, where's it? Get it, boy. Oh, come on. Come on, get it.
We played with that ball all afternoon. Ethan loved it.
Good boy. Get it. Come on. Hey, Dad. Watch this. Look what he can do. Okay, Bailey. Ready?
Ready.
Stay. And... okay. Go, Bailey! Out.
That's great, pal.
Thanks, Dad. Hey, come on. Oh, yes. Yes.
When it got colder outside, we all went back home. Every morning, a big yellow box with wheels took Ethan away from me. When Mom left the house, too, I was lonely and hungry and bored. At least they left the cat. I'd give him his dog lessons. So much to learn. No, dogs do not hide under pillows. Come on, hey, come on, sniff me. Sniff me. You don't know anything. Wow, you clear your throat a lot.
Bailey, no.
Wonderful scene. So, Chad, how is the music being used to shape the story of what we are seeing on the screen?
Well, that series of notes that we hear, da 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 da, forgive my singing, is a theme that Rachel Portman deployed throughout the film to evoke the relationship between the boy and the dog. There are a couple other thematic elements that we heard there too, kind of the frisky Bailey theme when he pulls the pillow off the cat. So these things can kind of subconsciously signal to an audience, take us back to that moment that we first heard that, and create continuity through a film, even as the characters may get older or the scenes might change. One of the things with the character of the dog was its voiceover, and the dog is never actually speaking with a human character in the film. So it became part of the function of music to establish the dog's personality. But it's very, it was explained to me by Robert Layton, the wonderful picture editor on this film, and my mentor, Gedney Webb, under whose supervision I served on the project, that the film was about regular people doing small, understandable things, not about grand gestures. And this is about as big and as grand as the music gets here. But it definitely wanted to support the storytelling gently, to support the sense of play, and of course, then the father's discovery at the dog's misdeeds.
It's a wonderful scene. And now, Richard, we're going to look at the Get Down. We're going to get the second roll-in ready. And the second scene we're about to see is from the Get Down. It's a Netflix original series created by Baz Luhrmann. A little trivia about the show. The Get Down has joined a three-way tie for the second largest budget in TV history at a cost of $10 million an episode to produce. The Get Down focuses on the 1970s New York City. Richard, before we look at the clip, can you talk a little bit about the lighting we're about to see in the Inferno nightclub?
Well, the show takes place in the 1970s, so initially the idea was that this disco club was supposed to look like something out of the 1970s. We did some research, but honestly, what we wound up with was a lot of other tricks and gags using things that didn't exist in the 1970s, certain LED things. But some of the other components, very kind of real thing, and the lighting is a combination of every trick in the book in there. Yep.
Okay, well, let's roll the Get Down.
Taking over the spot. Say get down, brothers, y'all making it hot. Get down, brothers, y'all making it hot. Say get down, brothers, y'all making it hot. Disco Ducks challenge, you can press to the mat. Got the B on my chest and the X on my back. South Bronx, North Bronx, East Bronx, West Bronx. Couldn't get down without your help. Let's rock. Let me your voice represent our bone proud. Sing along, BX. We all gonna fly now. Put your hands up. We're all gonna fly now. Shout out to Eddie. Thanks to her for letting us rock. Get down, brothers, in a disco spot. Yeah, Lazy Inferno. Go, Bronx.
So, Richard, how is lighting being used here to shape the story of what we're seeing on the screen?
Well, we built that whole environment. And it's funny to look at that because that was a big empty warehouse space. There was nothing in there. So we built everything. So the nightclub is very evocative of party time and people raving up and just, a lot of colored lights, the mirror balls, things that were period elements, but a lot of stuff built in. A lot of accidental things happen because if people walk into different lighting areas, you get these combinations. At the same time, we're doing a lot of very traditional photographic lighting, also where you gotta have a little fill or bounce or highlight and rim light and stuff. So the environment itself helps to contribute to that sense of excitement that you see there in the nightclub. Everybody having a good time, and it all combines together.
Are those professional are those
A
actors
mix.
from the
It's a
community?
mix. It's a mix. It was a real mix with the casting. The talent originally was, they didn't spend a lot of it. Was Jimmy Smits and Will Smith's son was the lead kid. But they didn't spend big money on the talent at first. But it was a mixture of dancers who were choreographed, entourage and hangers-on of people, because we needed a lot of people. And this was done over the course of several days, and sometimes when people sign up to be extras, they don't really understand what's really involved. There were people going like, could you tell Mr. Lerman to speed it up, because I gotta go home. And it's like, no, you just maybe have to go home then, because he's gonna do it on his own time. But the lighting helps to create that environment of excitement, the period, the time of day, the place. I'm a lighting guy, by the way. I'm a lighting guy's lighting guy. I've been doing this for a long time, and I love light and doing this stuff. Yeah, I know a lot about electricity and some physics and stuff, but it's all stuff that I learned over the course of time because I like light, and I talk to people who like light and photography and that whole element of things. So that was a real pleasure to build, because like I say, every trick in the book, LEDs and old stuff, that mandala thing in the ceiling, that was over 600 bulbs, and we could program it to be like expanding concentric rings, like a stone dropped in a pool of water, or we could have rings going around like a Ferris wheel, a different color. I mean, we had a lot of stuff.
So you didn't borrow
available.
that from Saturday Night Fever?
No, I built that from scratch. And the funny thing is also, we were talking before, the designer, they design it on a piece of paper, they don't engineer it. So that's something that me and the grips and the dressers gotta make the thing happen ourselves. We gotta order the bulbs, and we gotta get the wiring, and we gotta get the dimmer systems, and we gotta do all the engineering and figure it out. This is what I'm doing right now. I got guys over at the Broadway stage in Brooklyn.
What's the show you're working on now?
This is a show for CBS called Instinct. Alan Cummings is the lead. It's not on the air yet, but they draw things on paper, and then they throw it at me and my guys, and we got to make it work. And it's kind of like it's being like a magician or something, because it's like, how do you get stuff inside something that's sealed?
And you're talking about a magician. We have a virtual reality questions from film schools that have been emailing. Ingvar, could you read the first question that's coming in online?
Sure. This is for Chad Birmingham from Martin at NYU. You mentioned Pro Tools earlier, but what software do you use for music editing, and how important is it?
Martin from NYU.
Well, thanks for your question, Martin. Yeah, Pro Tools is really kind of an industry standard. If you go into a studio or a mixing stage, which is the final part of the process, they'll inevitably have Pro Tools if they're not running it as their main system. That said, composers will also use sequencing software to work with their samples, and that might be Motu's Mark of the Unicorn's Digital Performer, or Logic, or some other specialty software that they may have developed or just have a particular affinity to. Because part of being creative is working in a system and a workflow that's comfortable for you, that allows you to kind of not think about the technology and just let your creative expression take place. That said, we live in a very digitally mediated world now, so a lot of times, especially in putting a temp score together, composers might not be working with analog flesh and blood instrumentalists, but just working with a set of samples. And they'd like that to be as transparent to them as possible, and not, if you're communicating with other people through technology, then it pays to have a standard. But if you're off on your own, being tasked with writing some themes, Rachel Portman works in a very wonderful way. She writes on piano and records her demos, and then writes it out on paper, which parts should be played by which instrument. So that's a very analog, old school way of doing things, but it's a way that allows her to focus on the content of what she's doing rather than on the bells and whistles of the software.
Ingvar, you have another question that's coming in?
I actually do have a good question here. This is a question for both Richard and Chad from Raven at Fordham University. It asks, how do you get hired on a film? Also, who hires you?
Oh, let's start with Richard.
Okay, and I'm taking this as a personal question for me,
How do you
not
get
in
hired?
general, how do people, talking about me. I am usually hired either by the director of photography or the construction coordinator because they're familiar with my work. My reputation is my resume. There was another part to the question.
Yeah, who hired? Yeah, who hires you?
In this case, it's the cinematographer.
The cinematographer or the construction coordinator. By coincidence, I've been with the same construction coordinator now for about 15 years. Wow. But I sometimes do other projects with other people as well. But that's a lot of what it is, or the director of photography. Sometimes the producer, but usually there's so many people competing for these things that they usually hire the construction coordinator before the director of photography. So a lot of times I get called in before they've hired a director of photography.
And Chad, in your case, who hires you?
I might get hired by another music editor to assist them. I might get hired by a picture editor if they are focusing on the visual elements of the story and they need somebody to provide them with a temporary score or work with licensed music or find suggestions for that. So some options. I might get hired by a director if I've worked with them before, or a post-production supervisor is oftentimes the case because they're tasked with putting together the editorial team for post. So the assistants, the editors, they'll help hire the sound house. So it may be the production, post-production supervisor who gets me an interview, but it's leveraged by having worked with people before and, like Richard said, relationships.
Just to add, remember, it's not who you know, it's who knows you. All right, that's important. And before we take questions from the studio audience, Richard, this is for you. Can film students make a living as a studio mechanic, and what is the application process?
The answer is yes. It's not a career or a lifestyle for everyone, but yes, you can make a living, you can make a career. You may have to make some compromises with yourself and your family and your goals, but that's the way it is in life anyway. Usually also you'd have an area of interest. That's what I always suggest if you're going to follow this, that there's something that you really like. I like lighting, I'm into it. If you really like furniture, or if you're a really good carpenter, those are some of the natural directions to go in. How do you
the
get
application
in?
process?
Application process these days, right now, they just recently admitted a lot of people, so the application doors are closed right now. However, check the Local 52 website into the new year for when it reopens again. And what you have to do is submit application material. So first, you submit application material, and this is all outlined on their website for IATSE Local 52. You go, you check there, it tells you all the things you need to do. You submit a resume. There are certain OSHA classes that you're supposed to have taken beforehand. This stuff will stand you in good stead no matter what you do with your life. To know how to safely operate lifts, or or some of the other things you learn, to know how to tie knots. These things will stand you in good stead for your whole life. But these are some of the things required for the application process. If your basic application is approved, there's a $750 application fee. Then you go through other preliminary programs and testing and this and that. Once you have passed it and you're about to be brought in, there is then, at this time, I believe, an initiation fee of $2,500. So it seems like a lot of money. It can be a long process to get in, but it can be done. About 200 new people just came in. You don't have to have family. If you're inspired and really motivated, that's going to help a lot, rather than you just kind of looking for something to do that doesn't require much effort. But that's the way that you can get in, and it can be a great lifestyle. And like we said before, you get insurance, you get a pension program, you get people who, to some degree, backing you up when you're in a tight squeeze in a strange place. So those are some of the benefits for joining.
And Chad, how does film students get into music editing?
This is an interesting question. I think mentorship is a huge facet of people having a successful career in film and music editing in particular. And the kind of conundrum is that there are no entry-level music editing jobs per se, so you have to kind of be clever and make them out of existing materials. So maybe you know a friend whose film needs music, and maybe you yourself make music, or know somebody who has made music, and you could see those things fitting together. So then you could maybe obtain a copy of the film and a copy of the music and put them in sync with each other and facilitate that relationship. That said, the skills that are drawn on, are from music and from film. So I think building up skills in either of those areas and then trying to find areas of overlap is a practical way to go about it. For myself, I had more of a technical background than some of the people who came up through film editorial. And so I tried to make myself useful to music editors by putting their equipment together. They have these rigs of Pro Tools and speakers and monitors and everything that would need to be transported across town and then set up for them to come in on Monday and start working. So this is a way that I kind of used my existing aptitude and experience to gain access to their worlds, to make myself familiar, and to learn what it was that I would need to do if I were them. What equipment would I be using? How would I set it up? Who would I be talking to? So it's a kind of a specialty. Music editing is a niche. I worked in sound for a number of years, and I felt that served me in a technical way. And so sometimes, I think it's a smart person who wants to hire somebody who brings a set of skills that they themselves do not have. So I find success in relationships where the people I'm working with, I have something that they lack and they have something that I will gain to be exposed to, rather than hiring somebody with the same set of strengths and weaknesses.
Let's take some questions from our studio audience. Our microphone is being passed through. Yes, you have a question? Introduce yourself, say your name.
My name is Angelique Hernandez.
A little louder.
My name is Angelique Hernandez.
Now I got it.
This question is for Richard Cohn. Am I saying your
Cohn.
last? Cohn? Sorry about that. I see in the tail credits of a film, Best Boy. Why isn't it Best Girl? And what is the role of a best boy and the difference between a gaffer and a lighting gaffer?
If you could just repeat the question and your answer
Okay.
for our studio audience.
The question is about some of the terms of endearment used in the film business. The best boy is an older term. Some people do say best girl, but the term is, like I say, a term of endearment when they would hire the key, and a gaffer is a key, department head. They would say, and bring along your best boy, meaning bring along your dependable second person. Bring along your top assistant. Bring the good person you like to work with. You could have a best boy in the grip department or best girl or in the props. It's generally associated with the electric department. So you have a gaffer and a best boy would be the second. You asked what's the difference between a gaffer and a lighting gaffer. Lighting gaffer is generally the gaffer who works with the director of photography. He's a lighting man's lighting man, like a butler is a gentleman's gentleman. And there's some very wonderful women gaffers as well. The term gaffer goes way back. It means a variety of different things. It's kind of an English term. Sometimes means old timer. It also can mean the lamplighter, because they used to have a gaffing stick. It also refers to the oldest, most knowledgeable stagehand. But on a major production, you may have several gaffers working in tandem with the lighting gaffer. So you might have a second unit gaffer, you might have a rigging gaffer, you might have a house electric, you might have different locations that a gaffer would be stationed there. So the gaffer is the top of the department. The lighting gaffer is somebody who's actually doing the lighting. Not all electricians are gaffers. Many, many, many more electricians and other specialty board operators, lamp operators, than you have gaffers. And on a small production, just be one gaffer.
We have a second question. Yes, right here. Say your name, nice and loud.
Hello, my name is Keishane Williams, and this question is for Chad Birmingham. How did you start doing this type of work? What educational backgrounds do music editors have as well?
Oh,
Okay,
okay.
can you repeat the question in your answer?
Yeah, the question is, how did I start doing this type of work, and what educational background do music editors tend to have? In music, film post-production, it seems like the two major centers in this country are New York and Los Angeles, and so I've only worked in New York, and it seems like a lot of the people that I have worked with in New York have come from a music background. Maybe they're performing musicians who then got into the film world. So they come knowing music, and then they bring those skills into to bear in feature films. Others have gone to music schools or to film schools. I think there's a couple others, including myself, who did other things in liberal arts. And then I was fortunate to learn on the job through union apprenticeships that were kind of paid internships, if you will. And I think that for my own particular path, I mean, it was circuitous. I came to New York, worked for a few years making music in my spare time, and then I started working at a music company. When I interned at this sound facility and I saw the level of work that was happening and that you needed to be in a union to do it, I realized that I wanted to join, and it took a couple years actually before there was an open enrollment and I was allowed to join the guild as an apprentice. So in the meantime, I tried to find other work that would allow me to learn a subset of the skills that I would need to use as a music editor, whether that was editing music for other types of work or using the same technical skills, the same software, something that was kind of tangentially related. You know, there's a number of professionals that a music editor works with, a music supervisor or an orchestrator or a composer, and oftentimes these people have kind of ancillary roles, you know, that they need filled. A composer's assistant, or somebody who's working as a music coordinator and helping get music together to send out to a production to say, do you like any of these songs for your scene? So whereas those things might not be music editing per se, I think they're all kind of areas in which one could learn the skills that will be called on then as a music editor. So that's what happened to me.
Wonderful question. This is a question for both of you. And Richard first. What's the best part of your job and what's the hardest part of your job?
The two best parts of the job are making something from scratch that's really good, and some of the people I work with are really good folks, really good people.
And the hardest part?
Hardest part of the job, sometimes biting my tongue.
Chad? Best part?
I second that. Oh, best part, okay. The people, I mean, it's such an interesting, you know, the history of film in New York is a social history, it's a technical history, it's a labor history, and the people you meet who have been involved in that just have, are an untold depth of resource and depth of information and knowledge. I never get tired of the people that I meet and get to work with. The fun part for me is when I've been able to do something that's affected the final product. And by making a suggestion through the music that I've offered, and I see that the composers kind of picked up on that idea and they liked it and the director liked it, and I see that reflected in the final scene. That for me is kind of like a secret wink to the audience that, you know, nobody knows that I did, that anything really has been done, but that's very satisfying. trying to be able to have a psychological effect on an audience without them even knowing it. The hard part, I think, can be you were talking about the budgets for the Get Down. So with that amount of money comes a tremendous amount of pressure, and I feel sometimes that the task seems almost impossible to execute, or it's never been done before. And so you need to come up with a novel solution in a hurry because people need it done immediately, and there's a lot riding on it. So that can be a little stress-inducing.
So, Richard, this is for you. You know, I'm an avid golfer, and I went to caddy school. We learned a great deal of etiquette on the golf course, especially that if you don't know what club the person you're caddying for should use, you don't recommend it unless you're asked to. Could you talk a little bit about what is set etiquette?
Well, you underlined part of it right there. If you don't know something, shut up. Don't try and tell somebody something that you don't really know. Set etiquette, in a nutshell, a lot of it is being polite, being gracious, being quiet. I'm going to say something maybe people don't want to hear it, but you somewhat have to know your place on a whole big set. Some of these directors and talent, they're very high-priced and they're very full of themselves, and it's their party. I wouldn't be there unless they had somehow cobbled together the package to produce the thing. So there's a time and a place where you don't say anything. So you got to know when not to say something too.
Do you find younger people on the set are texting?
Yeah, don't do that. If you get a good boss and you're into texting or being on your phone all the time, don't do that. The good bosses are going to tell you, park that or don't come back. I don't want you here. You might be busy, but some of these fundamental things that would stand you in good stead if you worked on a ship or you're in the army or you're running your own business will stand you in very good stead working on location or in a studio. Certain responsibilities. And it's different things. I mean, I'm really appreciating what Chad's saying about the creative stuff. With us guys, yeah, we go to a studio or a stage every day early in the morning and stuff. But so some of these things, a lot of what I do, it's really service. Even though I get to be creative, some of the stuff that's going on right now back at the stage, I had to explain to the designer and the art director, who are much higher up on the food chain than I am, how we were going to accomplish the thing they had dreamed up. Because they had never thought of a way to actually do it. They'd just drawn pictures. So I have to be a diplomat also. And I've been doing this for a while. I've definitely put my foot in my mouth on several occasions, definitely shot myself in the foot several times. I've learned by observing others. These guys I work with, this is one guy I love him, but we call him the client killer. Because he'd get hired because he got great stuff, but when we got there, the producer wanted to shoot the guy in the head. Excuse me. But so it's important, particularly when you're just starting out or you're lower person on the crew, defer to your crew boss. Let your boss take all the hits. That would be my advice also.
It's great
Let your
advice.
boss take the hits.
Great advice. That's great. And Chad, this is our last question because we're running out of time. Do you have an agent, and how do you negotiate the terms of your employment?
Oh, yes. Boy, I wish I had an agent, Jeff. Yeah, it would make it so much easier to have those hard conversations about money and still put myself forth as this creative artist who is just cared only about executing the director's vision. There's a tension there. It would be great to do a good cop, bad cop routine with somebody. I mean, the union's great for this because there are minimums that need to be paid. So there is a minimum wage. There is a minimum call time. There's a weekly guarantee. I can't be asked to come in for an hour and just roll that into an extra hour next week. So there are really protections there for me, which have enabled me to work as a freelancer in this industry for 17 years without needing an agent. Anytime I have had an issue with payment, overtime, hours, the union's got a lot of people that it's representing, and we all work together to back each other
Being
up.
civilized, somewhat.
Well, we're out of time. And Richard and Chad, I really want to thank both of you for being guests on our second season
Thank you for having
premiere
me.
episode. This has been
Thank you,
wonderful.
Jeff.
So
you.
I'd like to thank the terrific BCC Media and Digital Film Club Studio TV crew here at BCC, our in-studio audience, the Governor's Office of Motion Picture Development, NYPA, and the local unions that provide great jobs and benefits for their members throughout New York State. And thanks again for joining us for Open Doors, and we hope to see you next time. Thank you. Wonderful show.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you. Great show.
Great show.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Great talking to you.
Yeah, likewise. What a treat to meet you.